Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to show you how to composite in Photoshop. So I'm going to start I've included a couple files in here, smoke and fire, in case you need them in the canvas shell. However, if I go into Maya and I've got my flame here, I've just did a quick little render. So I just created the fire as we did in previous lab. And I'm going to go into my render and render settings, and that's under this render tab here. And I'm going to go to Maya software, and I'm going to change it to be a PNG here. And then this is all fine, everything else is fine, and I'm going to click close. Now I'm going to go to render and render current frame, and you're going to see I have my flame here. So I'm going to go to File, Save Image, and I got this little error down here. I'm going to do this one more time, and the second time it worked fine. So and then I'm just going to go ahead and save it out as fire.png. You could select it from a list, but I've already set it in my render settings, so it's by default as file type, but you could go ahead and change it to a JPEG or whatever you'd like. So I'm going to save it as a PNG so it holds that alpha transparency information, and I'm just going to click save. Yes, I would like to replace it. And over here in Photoshop, close these. I've already included, this is the flame that I have in the canvas shell. You can feel free and take a new render if you'd like. And then basically what I've done, if I file, open, and then I locate where I saved it to, where did I save it? In my composite, I can go File, Open, locate my file, and then I'll press Control A to select all and Control C to copy. And then over here in my render composite file, I'll go ahead and paste it in. And now I can press Control T and I can place it wherever I'd like. And then after that, I'll name my layer. After that, I've placed the fire on my torch, and I can double click on here, and I can do something like an outer glow. I can change the color of it to whatever color I'd like. I can adjust the opacity, the noise that it does, and let me go ahead and show you over here so you can see the example. And then technique, I'm going to keep it at softer, but I could go ahead and increase this, and then the higher I increase the opacity, you'll see what the noise does. So try to get like a happy medium in there. And then blend mode I'm going to keep at screen. And then I'll click OK. And now I've got one flame. So then I would just copy this layer by clicking and dragging and go to new layer. It's going to copy it. I'll press Control T for edit transform. And then I'll just go ahead and put it wherever I'd like. So I've gone ahead and I've actually, I'll keep that one on there so I get a little bit different. And I've got 3 different flames here. All these 2 are the same. I just flipped horizontally by doing edit, transform, flip horizontal, just to give it a little different feel to it. And I've also added glows to it. So there's my fire composite. Now I could also, I've already gone ahead and imported or opened up the smoke that's included in here, and what I could do from here is I could paste this in, and then I can go under my blend mode and I could change it to like a soft light, and you'll see I get some smoke in here coming off of my fire. And I could change it also to something different, you know, vivid light, screen, whatever you feel might work well. I think maybe overlay might work a little bit better to give it some of that dark shading behind it. And I'll go ahead and put this actually underneath all of my layers here. And just in case you still have it as a 3D layer, you can change it from 3D to Essentials, your workspace here, your user interface. So I've added the smoke, and I'll just go ahead and duplicate this, and I'm just pressing Control T, and I'm just adding some of that sort of grungy smoke that's being cast off from the flame. And there we go. So now I've gone ahead and I've added these, and I'll put this in this layer as well, and then I'll type smoke for my smoke folder here, and now I've got that done. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a shading layer. Well, I'll just write shading, and I could do one that's highlights also, but I might just do both on the same layer to conserve time. But I'll go ahead and I'm going to change the blend mode. I'm going to use my brush tool, and I'm going to start with black, and I'm going to just start to sort of, I feel like the light's coming from over here casting this way, so I'm going to go ahead and start to paint in here, and I'm going to go ahead and just, now you'll see I painted that dark, but I'm going to go ahead under my blend mode and do soft light, and you'll see I start to get some extra variation in shading. And I'll just continue this process sort of all the way through, and I'm going to go ahead and just sort of do this. Maybe this time I use a slightly smaller brush, right? Something like that. And I'm just going to continue, and this would probably be pretty dark because it's behind, and then same thing on this side, and I'm just going to be adding a little bit extra to this, and then over here maybe this will be pretty well lit. On this side, maybe I increase my brush size and make sure my soft brush on the hardness is at 0%, and I start to sort of just do this side of this barrel here and use my eraser tool right here, and I can start to get some of this shading in here. So now that I've got that, and I'm just gonna, it's probably a little bit darker in here maybe because it's a little bit enclosed, so I can adjust it in there. Things like that, just to add a little bit more. And if I really want to get crazy intricate, I could start doing some of these stones, maybe even a smaller brush size, and I could just start to do some shading inside of these stones. But I'm going to leave the stones alone for now. So I've gone ahead, I've added some extra shading in here, and now also I'll bring it just a little bit, and I could start to do a little bit more in here. I'm going to hold Control plus and zoom in. You'll see I could even go ahead and get in here a little bit more, but I think it's fine for what it is for now. So I could even do, not on my highlights, on my shading, I could add some shading here to the ground underneath my little window inset, and do something like that, and maybe something if I wanted to get really intricate with it. And it does look okay, so I'll just go ahead and do something like so. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding some highlights. So on this layer, I'm going to change this to a soft light, and I'm going to switch to white. And I could do different shades of gray basically to add highlights to some things. So I'm going to start, I guess I'll start on this sword, and I'm just going to make one of these sides maybe have a little bit of shine on it, maybe even a little slightly smaller. And I'll just go ahead and sort of, maybe a little bit bigger, add some highlights in here. And maybe not this sword, it's a little bit not exactly what I'm going for, but maybe over here, because it's got the flame directly next to it. And I'll bring my brush size a little bit smaller, and you'll see I start to get, and then on this side I'll start to and then I can go ahead and on my eraser tool set the hardness to 0 because I want it to be soft, have that soft look to it. And then switch back to my brush tool, and I can start to do a lot of neat little tricks. So I'll start right here because this side is going to be much closer to the flame, and I'm just going to go ahead and just kind of paint that out. Oop. And I can even go a little bit brighter actually, or larger with my brush size, and start to really get some of this information in here, like so. And I'm just using my brush and my erase tool, and like so. Oop. And I'll bring my brush size a little bit smaller, something like so. Alright, and I could do that all the way through. I can make it even smaller brush size and just sort of spot a little spot on each one of these because this is closer to the light on these little bolts here, and maybe, you know, just to give it a little extra pizzazz, I guess you'd say. And if I wanted to go in here and sort of start to make some of this part brighter, and maybe I want to go back to my shadow shading layer and just maybe make it a little bit darker because it has that inset right here. And let's just say I don't want it to be at a full black and I want it to be like halfway on the shading, a little too close, so we'll go a little bit darker, and I'll start to give this, I'm going to even increase my brush size a little bit and just sort of get some of that information in there, and then come back, just delete a little bit of it, erase a little bit of it, right? And you can get some really neat effects in here doing it this way. So something like so, and then maybe it switches to be, you know, whatever. Anyway, now I can also, if I don't want this to be super bright, and I want it to be a little bit lighter but not bright white, because some of these have a lot not as strong of a lighting situation to it, I can sort of just start to paint in some of that information. And again, let's just say because this part is so close to the flame, I'll just do like a quick little light update here, maybe something like that. And then because this is so close to the flame, maybe I'll paint that on, and this is all really close to the flame, right? And then maybe on my shading I'll switch to my dark gray and adjust my brush size to be slightly smaller and just do a little bit something like so. And then because this is, I don't know, just to give it a little bit more contrast, that'll have like a little self-shadowing here, maybe a little self-shadowing here, and I'll go to my highlights here and I'll start to just do a little bit of highlights on this, something maybe on this side. And now also on my books I could start to, you know, bring out some of that higher. This one's going to be darker probably, this one sticks out a little bit more, this one sticks out, something like that. And then on the back end of it, on my shading layer, start to, because this side will probably be darker, and then here, and then maybe I'll switch to a lighter color and do, this side is going to be darker, and then here I'll just bring my brush size a little bit smaller. And then on my highlights layer, you can do this all in the same layer, it's just a matter of how you want to do it. Here I'll just make that a little bit brighter. This is going to be a little bit darker, but from here to here will probably be lighter. Things like this, right? And actually let me go ahead and increase my brush size a little bit, maybe here to here, a little bit lighter, right? And then shading layer, go over here, make it a little bit darker in some areas. And then up here, maybe this has a little bit dark shading in here. And then I'll switch to my light color. And maybe bring out some of this information. This will probably be darker right here if I didn't, on my shading layer, if I didn't already do that. And then this one's going to be super dark in here, and probably this one too. And then on my highlights layer, I'm going to come over here and just start to get a little bit more oomph out of it. And I already did that part. And then I'm pretty happy with something like that. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to just show you, once I hide these layers, what it looks like. So I'm getting a lot more information in here that just would be, it's possible to do in Maya, but it's a lot nicer to be able to sort of edit it as needed and really bring out some of these colors. So I'm going to just group this together and call this shading and highlights, and then just toggle it on and off one more time. And then also on my shading and highlights, maybe on my highlights layer, I'll switch to a bright white, and right here I'll bring my brush size higher, and because this is all sort of right where the flame is, maybe this is a little bit brighter, you know, stuff like that. And I could essentially bring this layer way underneath here and make sure it's behind my smoke and fire, right? And on my highlights, just start to sort of paint this in a little bit more, right? And maybe, I don't know, something like that. But you get the idea. So maybe this side is a little bit more brighter because I've got this flame right here, right? Actually, I'm going to just keep it sort of behind the flame. And then maybe on my shading layer, I'll bring this a little bit lighter and go on my shading layer, and I'll just have it be a little bit darker here in the corner, and sort of blend them in, the shading in together a little bit, something like that. And then also you can see I get a nice little contrast there, and my flames are really projecting a lot more light. And the more you toggle and play around with it, you can get really great examples. And let me go ahead and just throw all of this into one big group and just show you what it looks like before and after. So before and then after, and we start to get a lot more interesting look to it, which can really up the value of your work. It can look a lot nicer if you go ahead and do something like this. You don't have to stick with just like effects either. You could like import anything you want, such as, you know, if you had another shield or something, or you wanted to import a character in this scene, that's basically what you'd be doing. That's sort of rendering by layers, and this way you wouldn't have to render the entire scene all at once, and you could render, you know, just the background one frame, and then render the character with a PNG sort of alpha transparent background as a separate layer. And this way you'd be able to import your character in, and you'd be able to see, it would save you a ton of time on render time. So that's a really common practice that studios do, because this way you're not rendering out a full scene every single frame. You'd be rendering out just the background once. So you could do a really high quality, really intricate render of one frame, and then you could import your character, for instance, and then you could export that out with that alpha background as we did with the flame, and then you'd only have to render just that character. If you had a set animation of, like, let's just say, I don't know, 30 seconds of animation in the scene, you could render them out in here, and then you'd have your character in the scene, but it would save you so much render time. So, and then you could pretty much do the same thing editing wise in Premiere. But at the moment, we're just going to focus with Photoshop. Alright, so I hope this was helpful. This is just a quick little intro to compositing a scene in Photoshop. And again, this is the before and the after. And obviously I could do a little bit more with it and get, you know, really detailed with it, but just as an example, I feel this is good. So anyway, if you have any questions, shoot me a message, and thank you for watching. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video.